Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Alexandra felt excited by the challenge of giving birth. She did yoga and the Transform Your Birth course. Even though she wanted a low intervention birth, she knew she would have to learn to be okay with whatever unfolded on the day. With an induction looming, she did everything to bring this baby on. And it worked. Through the process of getting clear and communicating to her partner and support team what was important to her, she was able to surrender to the birth and work with her tools to get through what ended up being a fierce labour. Lots of great birth wisdom shared in this episode. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Welcome everybody for another episode of the Transform Your Birth course. And with me today is lovely Alexandra, and she's got her beautiful baby on her lap who's sound asleep. I don't know whether he'll stay that way, but we keep it real on the podcast. Whatever happens, happens. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell me, you were pregnant with your beautiful son. How are you feeling about the prospect of giving birth, and what did you do to prepare?
I was excited to give birth. Pregnancy itself wasn't too kind to me mentally, so I was really focusing on giving birth, and I tried to see it as a challenge, so I was really excited to get that going. I didn't really prepare much about what happens after. I was really focused on birth and on the challenge that's going to come up. I prepared, like I did prenatal yoga, I did the birth course with you, and I listened to like the podcast basically every time I was in the car. So they were my main preparations for the birth.
And when you listened to people's stories, what was it about people's stories? Did it give you confidence? Did it scare you? How did you go? Was it mainly my podcast you listened to or others?
I listened mainly to your podcast and to Australian birth stories.
Mm-hmm.
I try to generally just focus on the positive ones, and like what can I take out of this, because I was really set on having a normal low intervention vaginal birth, and I was worried if that doesn't happen that I'd be disappointed. So I really was looking for podcasts where things went differently, and hearing how people still made this a really good experience, because that was one of my biggest worries actually.
Yeah. I think your point is very true. You know, we can have these ideas and ideals about how we want to give birth, but we also know that we're about to walk into a situation that we can't completely control. We can influence it, and that's what we try to learn in this podcast, but we can't control it. And so listening to stories of people who've been able to roll with the changes and adapt to whatever their unique conditions were makes a huge difference to creating a bit more confidence, particularly for your subconscious mind, which doesn't like not being in control and looks out for danger. So that's good. So when you did my course, how did that change the way you felt? What sort of things really landed for you?
Well, just trying to be okay if things change. So I wasn't scared of the medical system. I was planning on having a hospital birth. I did want the hospital support, but I just wanted to make sure that it feels right for me. So I feel like talking it all through in the course, it helped me to try to make peace with whatever happens in the situation, and just mentally prepare myself. Okay, if it completely goes a different route that I expected, that I'm able in that moment to go with it and not be
Yeah.
completely disappointed while it's happening.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we've got to have tools and things to work with birth under all circumstances. So that's very wise. And what about your partner, Alexandra? How did he experience the course and what sort of changes he noticed?
He thought it was fantastic, and I was very happy that he thought it was fantastic because I feel like it just gave him. He said it gave him tools and a little bit of preparation what he can do, and
Yeah.
not just being a bystander. So he had things that he could do. He kind of was. He just had more of a plan than just kind of going into and winging it, and I think that made him feel way more secure, just
Mm.
to kind of be prepared and know what he wants to do and how he wants to support me.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Okay. And so tell us, how did it unfold for you?
So I was meant to be induced on
Mhm.
a Sunday because I had gestational diabetes. My bub, he was on ultrasound. He measured really big,
Mhm.
so the word induction was thrown around at 39 weeks. But I was feeling really really well physically, so I was like, I'm gonna write this out, and I was pushing as like ahead as long as possible. So the induction was scheduled for 40 and 4, and I had a stretch and sweep, didn't do anything. I had another stretch and sweep, and the midwife walked in and said, I got 30 years experience. I got you. We're going to get this going. And the next day at 6 o'clock, I had a cramp that was not the way it usually was. I had back fatigue beforehand, and that was different.
Yeah.
And it started right away every 3 minutes.
Wow.
So I told my partner, I was cooking at the time, making dinner. I said, I think we're on tonight. Just, you know, let's get this going because tomorrow is the induction at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um, we have like less than a day to make this happen. So we had cooked dinner, had dinner together, kept timing it. Even if people say just take it really easy, just kind of give it some time. I was like, I'm not giving this time. This baby needs to come out before
You're a
before
woman on a mission.
before I gotta go in for the induction. We're gonna do this. It's coming. I feel right. So we had dinner. I listened to another meditation, practiced the breathing through the nose again. I practiced at heat.
Mm.
I thought, having a relaxing shower, all the things just to make this happen. And then it got more intense. So I thought I'd do the right thing. I give the hospital a heads up. So I just called them and said, hey, things are starting. Just wanted to let you know, maybe come in tonight, or I'm planning to come in tonight. And the midwife was fairly like, oh, you're first time mom. This can go on for days. Just take your time, relax, come in tomorrow for your induction and we see you tomorrow. And in my head, I thought, absolutely not. I'm coming in tonight. I'm coming in tonight. I'm going to have this baby beforehand. I tried to really make pace with the induction, but I was like, now it's my chance, literally.
Yeah.
So, well, you learn in the evening if it starts, rest and take it easy. Don't exhaust yourself. And I said, well, how do I get this oxytocin going to just increase what's happening?
Yeah.
So, was like love hormone, as we learned in your course. So it was like hugging my partner. I thought, maybe nipple stimulation, masturbation, all the things. I was like, we're going to get this out.
Can I
And
just come in there? I think it's really interesting. You've gone into labor the day before you're scheduled for an induction, and yet it's still in your mind, you're thinking, I'm going to need to be induced. And even the midwife alluded to, well, come in for your induction tomorrow. So she's also given you this idea. If you're in labor, you do not need an induction. You've already started. But
yeah,
it's interesting how time played out in that space, isn't it? So you felt the
yeah,
pressure to make things happen. So you got all lovey-dovey with
yeah.
your partner. What sort of things were you doing? Tell us more about that.
Oh, well, I did not plan to share that on the podcast, but like things like nipple stimulation,
Yeah, yeah.
masturbation in the shower.
Yeah.
I thought, just I really tried to get my mind off the induction the next day because
Yeah.
I didn't want to be pushed. That like I just wanted to speed things along naturally, so I don't feel the pressure, because I was worried that the pressure and then the worry about it would slow it all down.
Yeah.
So
Right.
really try to just vision that I'm going to have the baby, vision that the contractions are going to be more intense. And I really tried to, when a contraction came, even when it was really light at the start, to just really embrace it
Yeah.
and just really go with it, and trying to just mentally, instead of working against it, to try and work with it, to hope that the next one is stronger, to just speed it along, literally.
It's
And I feel like
interesting.
it did work.
Yeah. Well, here's what Alexandra is saying is spot on, because nipple stimulation creates oxytocin production. So breastfeeding from, obviously oxytocin's the hormone of love. So breastfeeding makes you love your baby, and although bottle feeding does too, but that nipple stimulation supports any type of sex, orgasm, all of that stuff can be very, very helpful in promoting good labour response. So with that in mind, it's not a bad little hint, and it seemed to work for you, Alexandra.
Well, I read that somewhere, and I was like, I just got to give things a go, because I do want this
Yeah.
to happen as stressless as possible. And I called the midwife the very first time at 10 o'clock. And by 2 o'clock, I was still adamant to stay home and labor longer at home, just to keep the environment nice and cozy. And my partner was like, nah, this is too strong now. We're going, because he was really starting to worry that things are really ramping up. What was good, because he basically dragged me to the car, and I don't know afterwards if I would have been able to make the car ride. So I think he definitely was right. And we called the hospital on the way, because I was really worried that they're going to say again, oh, just come in tomorrow. Your first time mum, and this can go on for days. So we called them on the way like 5 minutes before we arrived, so that there was no choice. And I got there. I also called my friend, because I had my friend lined up to be a support person during the birth. And she started driving at 10 o'clock, because she lives 2 hours away. So she literally met us the moment we walked into the hospital. And the midwife checked me, and I was 2 centimeters at the time. So I had listened to lots of podcasts where women were describing that they were disappointed. So I feel like I mentally prepare myself the whole way there. And if they say I'm not more than 1 centimeter, that I'm going to be really happy with it. So I think at the time I was expecting to be more dilated, but I was absolutely fine with being 2 centimeters. And then they started monitoring my baby, because it was over 40 and 4, and they thought like it's policy. So they monitored him and said they're going to do that for 15 minutes. If everything is fine, they're going to give me a sleeping tablet, some Panadol, and send me back home. And in my head again, I thought, absolutely not. This baby's going to come. So the good thing was, so Elias was fine, but his heart rate didn't go up and down as they would expect. So afterwards, someone told me that a lot of babies sleep before birth, and I reckon he might have just slept, because his heart rate was constant 145 without any change.
Yeah.
So they were not able to send me home due to policy. So they had to keep me. What I was actually really happy about, my friend set up the room. I was sitting there with Zach, just kind of like getting comfortable, going through the contractions. It wasn't too intense yet. My friend also called the student midwife that I had as a support person, just to let her know things are happening. And then the midwife on duty, she mentioned, well, if you've got to stay anyway, we might as well break your water on the next check. And originally I was really not keen on breaking waters, because I didn't want to be on the clock.
Yeah.
But at the time I was so keen to get this baby out. I was ready. I was like, radio, let's break the water. So they broke my water at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was 3 centimeters. And that really, really ramped it up. Like it got very intense really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And what I did not expect is that the contractions in between, I felt like I didn't get a break. So that was something that was new to me, and at the start I really struggled to deal with that.
Yeah.
But I really tried the breathing through the nose, finding a position that was as comfortable as possible, my partner could just be with me, basically. And then the student midwife and my friends did like the hip squeeze as well. I was holding my partner's hands. And we had the music going, and the midwife on duty basically left us kind of doing our thing.
Yeah.
When it got more intense, I had to change position, and I was like kneeling on the bed with holding on to the bed head. And that was how Elias was born at the end. So I tried a few positions, and that was the one that seemed to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Pain relief wise, so I had a TENS machine organized, and I had the TENS machine on the whole time. What I thought really helped.
Yeah, tell us how you experienced the support of the TENS machine and what difference that made.
I feel like it just gave me something to focus on, a different sensation to focus on. And because it had the little remote that I had around my neck, I was holding on to it with one hand. I felt like it gave me something else to hold on to and to focus on when I pushed the button. So that was mainly, I feel like it just gave me something to do and to focus on a different sensation when a contraction was coming on.
And did it feel like it lessened the sensation of the contractions?
I feel like it didn't lessen the sensation, but because my focus wasn't mainly on the contraction, it made it easier to get through.
Yeah. The TENS machine is something worth exploring in that it doesn't have any residual effects on you or the baby. When we have pharmacological pain relief, like even gas is probably the lightest. It goes through much quicker, the baby, but things like morphine and epidural do have a very big impact on mum and bub. And also that post-birth period too, babies can be very sleepy and slow to feed, and that just has then a flow-on effect with the feeding regime. So the TENS machine doesn't have any residual effects like that and can be very useful. Some women say it was amazing, other women say it didn't do anything. But I think what you're describing there, Alexandra, is the power of the mind to focus on other things other than what you're experiencing, and giving. It's almost a little bit like a placebo. Whether it made a difference to how you experience the sensations, it felt like it did, because when you think you're getting help, your body responds accordingly. So yeah, very powerful.
I would definitely use it again. It was the first thing that I would use again. Absolutely.
Cool.
I did. So I was laboring, kneeling on the bed with my partner Zach on my right, my friend on my left. So, and the student midwife was like pushing my hips every time. So I feel like I had a really good support system. The lights were dimmed, the music was going. I had a birth music prepared, and I got stuck on one song that like literally ran on repeat the whole night. And so I felt very, very safe and supported.
Yeah.
What was really good, and I really liked that I had the student midwife with me, because she was absolutely amazing through the whole birth preparation as well. And then my friend that I knew organized the cat, the dog, the house, just everything else, so that Zach and me just could be partners having a baby.
Yeah.
So if he wanted to go outside quickly to have a drink, he didn't feel like that he left me. He knew there were people taking care of me, and we could just really focus on having a baby, what was really, really fantastic.
Yeah, that can be nice. If you do get an opportunity to get a student midwife, that's great. And having backup support can be incredibly helpful, but you have to choose very, very wisely people who come into the birth room. You don't need people in there who have their own issues around birth, and particularly bringing fear into the room.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you had a great little team there.
So as I said, I felt very supported, and I had with every person I went through my birth plan for all situations, who can communicate what I would like. So I felt just it's all going the way I want, even if it would change in the plan.
You can surrender then, can't you, to just do a job. Beautiful.
And people said to me they felt like I was completely in my own world, but I felt like I could, because everything else was taken care of. I did end up using the gas at some point, because what really was unexpected to me is that between the contractions, I feel like I didn't get a break. As soon as the water were broken, it just kept going and it kept going. So the gas has helped me just to get through their time in between.
Yeah.
Um,
It's an
what?
interesting, I might just stop you there. It's an
Yeah,
interesting thing about breaking waters.
yeah,
Um, it, it, it can be good reasons to do it, and there can be not so good reasons to do it. And it's not always easy to make that call. And what Alexandra's describing there is when you break the waters, you bring the baby very heavily down on the cervix, and depending on how open that door is and how their head's presenting, it sounded like he was in a very favorable position in that respect. It can really cause your contractions to ramp up quite a bit. If we break the waters too early in labour, we can predispose babies to not so good head positions because the process of labour, the nature of those contractions, which is not only are they pulling open the door, but it's shrinking the uterus and it's pushing your baby into that lovely down tuck dive position. And we want to give the uterus enough time to really shrink enough to move babies into that tuck dive position so the crown of their head is presenting. And if we break waters too early, it might mean that the baby flexes their head back a little bit or to the side or even puts a hand there. One of the women I worked with, she'd had 4 vaginal births. They broke her waters to start her labour for her 5th baby, and the baby put their arm across the front and it was an obstructed labour and she needed a Caesar. So you want to always be very mindful as to whether it's a good idea to break the waters or not. Now, typically what will happen with most births, not all births, but most births, is waters will break naturally right at that point where they're starting to come out of the door, where the pressure's at its greatest, which is when you're heading into second stage, which is the pushing phase. So that breaking it a little bit earlier, Alexandra, would have
yeah,
really ramped it up, but then it would have probably made your labour a lot shorter as well. So what
yeah.
happened?
Well, I felt the urge to push pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, we just broke your water, don't push it, just kind of go with it.
Yeah.
Because I thought it's literally going to come out within an hour. It did take longer.
Yeah.
So I started to really feel like there's no way around this. I need to push. And I remember a friend of mine said, when you feel like this, you can't do this anymore, this is all you got, then the baby's going to come. And I felt like, okay, this is too much pressure. I'm just going to, I don't know, implode.
Yeah.
And I remembered that at that moment. I was kneeling there. I remember I was kneeling there. I was holding my TENS machine. I was holding the gas in the other hand, holding onto the bed head. And I thought, I'm going to just implode so the baby must come now. Like it's time, it's got to come. And in my head, weirdly, I thought about all the things like, when would people ask for an epidural? Because then I told myself, I was like, I know I'm way too late now, but when would people ask? Like, would I have, even if I would have wanted it, when would I have done that? So I started like thinking about really random things from before.
Yeah.
And I tried, so it was very interesting. And then I said to them, I said, he's coming. Like I can feel him coming. And suddenly I felt really, really heavy.
Yeah.
And that was it. So I knew he was coming. And then the student midwife mentioned to the midwife that came back into the room, Alex really wants to like catch him herself if possible. Mm-hmm. And I had said I had both my hands full. So I was thinking about how I'm going to do this because I got the TENS machine in one hand, I got the gas in the other hand. I got to support myself with holding to the bed head. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So they were like, well, on the next contraction, he might be coming down. Mm-hmm. So I was ready. But instead of waiting for the contraction, I thought I got to turn around. I'm going to catch this baby. So I just pushed with everything I had. And it came out then when I pushed and I turned around. I almost flicked my leg into the midwife's face because I was so quick turning around, grabbing him myself. I think she just had him in her hand maybe like a millisecond.
Really?
Because I really wanted to hold him myself. So I dropped everything, swung my leg around and grabbed him off her. And at that moment, like all pressure, everything just stopped.
Wow.
I feel like the world completely stopped and he was there and he was like beautiful color. He started crying immediately. I had him on my chest. It was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, wow. Gosh, how amazing. And so how did he respond once he came through? What
The
did he do?
baby,
Yeah,
when he was on my chest, I feel like he just opened his eyes. He looked at me for like a minute, and then he started looking for the breast. It was
really.
he was very eager. And remember you showing us that video with the breast crawl, and midwives were like really good with giving us the time. So the cord was still attached, and then he was just laying on my breast trying to feed and find. And during that time, we cleansed the cord, and I cut the cord myself.
Yeah.
And then I just had some time, and we had like a cuddle and a cry, everyone, and how beautiful. And he did latch on. It was a little bit difficult for him, but he did latch on. So we ended up helping him just a little bit, especially as well. The midwives got a little bit worried because I did lose a lot of blood and I did tear. So they wanted to give us the time, but also wanted to make sure that I am okay.
Yeah.
They ended up, I wanted to have a completely no intervention placenta delivery.
Yeah.
And they gave me lots of time. And then they were like, look, you just lost quite a lot of blood, more than we like. Are you happy for us to give you an injection? So we did the injection, and the placenta came then just uneventful. And then they talked me through the tearing, and they had someone come in to just have a look and make a plan. By that time, the hour with him, we had the full hour. He nursed on one side, he nursed a little bit on the other side. And then they were like, well, you're doing so well, the baby's doing well, let's stitch you up in the room. We tore 2nd degree. Unfortunately, the blocking, the local anesthetic didn't really take. So I was not tolerating the stitching up at all.
Yeah.
And it was very good. They gave me the option to go to theatre and to have a spinal then and have it sewn up all in theatre. And I was really happy with that option because I'm not worried about hospitals. I was just wanting being taken care of, basically.
Yeah.
So my partner stayed with Elias, and they took me to theatre then after.
Right. And the benefit of that can be that they can do a really good job of bringing those tissues back together. You know how you tore, was that a problem for you when it happened? Were you okay with the fact that you tore?
I was really worried that I will tear. So I was at the physio beforehand to get all the tools to not tear, and I was really worried about it. I cannot tell you when I tore. It didn't worry me at all. When the baby was out, I even said to my friend, can you please take a photo? I want to know how it looks. So I was not worried about it at all whatsoever.
Yeah. So it's now, this is a good point. I want to pick up on this because the idea of tearing is a huge thing for us women to get our heads around because, you know, that's a pretty significant part of our bodies and very tender and sensitive. And the idea of it really does your head in. But I can pretty much guarantee almost every one of you, I'm sure, that at the time it is the last thing you're thinking about because there's such bigger things going on. And it's very rare that women even feel it because the sensations are already there anyway, whether you tear or not. And then, of course, the recovery, you know, it's like any wound. You just bring the tissues back together and the body heals. And then you've got these beautiful marks of motherhood on your sacred cave.
The recovery was way easier than I thought. I had no trouble sitting. I had no pain. I was expecting the worst, and it all really didn't happen.
That's good. Well, we're very fortunate to have health professionals who are very good at that sort of work. So just make sure when you do get repaired that you get the best. Don't just go for the trainees. Oh, that's great. So it was a fairly straightforward, uncomplicated birth, Alex. What did you learn about yourself as a result of going through that?
I feel like to trust my body because I was really, my intuition that I do not want to, that I feel really good physically and that I can keep the baby longer than 39 weeks. Yeah. And that, well, the body's made to do it. And they just kind of proved that it is possible, and with the right support to give it a go.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I felt and what I communicated with my support people, like I was right with how I felt. So I really could trust what was going on. I think that was very interesting, that it really is the way you feel it.
Yeah.
So that was very empowering to me, that I felt like I had that feeling of my own body to know what is going to happen. And I believe if something would have been different, I would have known and made the right decision as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's lovely that you really learnt to trust yourself and your sense of what needs to happen. Do you think that's translated into parenthood?
I hope so. We will find out. We will find out. But
Let me answer that question, because I've watched lovely Alexandra in our new mothers groups, and she's a fierce mother. She's a fabulous mother. She's certainly not to be messed with, and she's marching to the beat of her own drum. And I think, the journey of pregnancy and then giving birth can really set us up for that. And from where I'm looking, I can see that determination and that making sure you did all the things that you could to make sure everybody knew how you felt and what you wanted and what was important to you. You got a great team around you. You did the preparation, you did the practices. You did all the things that you had control over, and you were smart enough to know that you had to let go on the day and be okay with whatever unfolded, because that really is where we're walking into, which is the mystery. And of course, that's parenting in a nutshell. You just don't know from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, what these children are going to need, what they're communicating, and how we meet their needs. And I've watched Alexandra make this transition, and she's doing beautifully. Is there anything else you want to say to our listeners?
What I would do different going into the next birth, if I have another child one day, is to make sure to use the bathroom in between.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Because when I went to theatre and they did the spinal, they placed a bladder catheter before they stitch you up, and I had 1.5 liters of urine in my bladder, and I pushed him past a huge bladder. And I think that maybe things would have been easier.
Yeah.
If I would have used the bathroom several times.
That is one of the most important jobs of the support people, is to remind the mother to go to the toilet every hour and a half to 2 hours. And it can be very easy to forget, because you just think the mother knows, but because there's so much pressure down there, she doesn't always have that same sensitivity to her bladder. And bladders can get in the way of babies coming down. So how do you think that might have changed things?
Well, I feel like maybe there was also part that the pressure never stopped in between.
Right.
At the very end, especially. I thought that he might have, because I had the urge to push fairly early. So I feel like maybe I would have birthed him earlier if there would have been more room.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
So, we talked about going to the bathroom in between, but it was unable to move off the bed.
Right.
So, but that would be something that I definitely would do differently next time.
Yeah. You needed a big pee at the end. When the bladder gets too big, it can spasm, and that can make it very difficult to pee then. So that's a great little hint. Tuck that one away. It's important we pee regularly through the labour and birth. Yeah, beautiful. Well, Alexandra's given us lots of great things to learn from her birth experience. It's an important time in your lives, doing the preparation, getting the right support, communicating to your carers what's important to you, and then being ready to adapt and anchor yourself to some tools that can support you under whatever circumstances you find yourself in. And I'll tell you now, the top 2 tools for that is the ability to breathe really calmly and gently through the nose, and the ability to relax deeply in order to optimize your body's response to birth. These are all really important things that we can start to cultivate in preparation. So thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you again next week. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.